Drop a puppy into a lake for the very first time in its entire life and watch what happens next naturally. It does not panic, it does not sink, and it certainly does not need to enroll in expensive swimming lessons beforehand. Its head stays above the surface, its paws paddle instinctively, and it propels itself toward the safety of the shore without thinking. You can do this with a kitten, a piglet, a mouse, or almost any mammal walking on four legs today. They possess an ancient built-in survival mechanism, allowing them to navigate deep water immediately without any prior life experience. But try dropping a human being into deep water before they have formally learned how to swim consciously through practice. The result is immediate panic, violent thrashing, swallowing water, and ultimately a completely terrifying inability to stay afloat naturally. We consider ourselves the absolute pinnacle of evolutionary development on this planet, biologically, technologically, and intellectually speaking today. We built titanium submarines to explore the crushing darkness of the ocean floor and rockets to casually escape Earth's gravitational pull entirely. Yet we are one of the only mammals on the planet born entirely incapable of surviving a simple accidental fall into a river. Nature somehow stripped humans of a basic survival instinct almost every other creature receives completely for free at birth. Why did evolution leave us so incredibly vulnerable in a world covered mostly by vast oceans and unpredictable deep water? To understand this evolutionary mystery, you first have to let go of a very popular internet myth circulating online for years. You have probably seen those viral videos of newborn babies seemingly swimming happily underwater with their eyes wide open. People watch these beautifully shot videos and assume humans actually are born with a swimming instinct that we somehow just forget later. But those babies are not actually swimming, and they are definitely not completely safe if left alone in the water either. What you are seeing is something scientists call the mammalian diving reflex, an automatic biological response to sudden facial submersion. When cold water hits a baby's face, its heart rate drops immediately to conserve oxygen circulating through the tiny bloodstream. The airway closes completely automatically to prevent water from entering the lungs, and their arms and legs move reflexively without thought. It looks like swimming, but it is entirely an unconscious biological illusion designed strictly for temporary, desperate survival. The baby cannot consciously raise its head to breathe, it cannot choose a direction, and it cannot keep itself from drowning eventually. More importantly, this fascinating biological reflex fades away almost completely by the time the human child is just 6 months old. We are not born swimmers. We are just born with a temporary pause button for drowning that disappears incredibly quickly as we grow. The real reason you cannot swim instinctively comes down to a fundamental physical choice your ancestors made millions of years ago. For hundreds of millions of years, life existed exclusively inside the deep oceans, moving effortlessly through water as a natural habitat. Then some brave ancient creatures crawled slowly onto land, eventually evolving into the countless land-dwelling mammals walking the earth today. During that incredibly long transition, most terrestrial mammals kept a body shape that still worked reasonably well if they accidentally fell back into the water. But our ancestors eventually made a choice that gave us human civilization itself while making us astonishingly clumsy whenever we enter a swimming pool today. Look closely at the anatomy of any four-legged animal standing comfortably on solid ground somewhere right now. Their spine is perfectly horizontal, and their massive chest cavity acts exactly like a large biological balloon filled continuously with air. When a dog enters the water, its center of gravity naturally keeps its body flat and its head perfectly elevated above the surface. It does not have to learn a special posture, because the posture required for swimming is exactly the posture it uses for walking daily. The famous doggy paddle is literally just an animal continuing to run away from danger while suspended weightlessly inside liquid. Now consider the incredibly strange and entirely unique architectural design of the modern human body by comparison. Millions of years ago, early hominids made the radical evolutionary decision to stand upright on 2 legs permanently. This massive adaptation, known as bipedalism, freed our hands to carry food, forge weapons, build tools, and eventually create modern human civilization. But bipedalism was an absolute anatomical disaster for our natural buoyancy and physical survival whenever we fell into deep water. Our center of gravity shifted completely away from the buoyant chest and moved all the way down into our dense, narrow pelvis. We developed incredibly long, heavy muscular legs designed specifically for walking long distances across the African savanna as efficiently as possible. When an untrained human falls into water, those heavy vertical legs act exactly like biological anchors, pulling us violently downward. Our natural upright walking posture suddenly becomes the absolute worst possible position you can take while trying to stay alive and float. To survive in water, a human must completely ignore their deepest natural instinct to stand up and try to balance themselves vertically. We have to force our bodies horizontally, push our chests down, and kick our legs upward against the relentless, invisible pull of gravity. Nothing about this horizontal posture is intuitive to a nervous system wired for upright, walking across solid ground continuously over millions of years. But gravity and long, heavy legs are only one part of the story explaining our absolute helplessness in the water biologically. The second reason involves something evolutionary biologists refer to as the terrible, unavoidable dilemma of the human brain historically. Most mammals on Earth are born precocial, meaning they enter the world with bodies already capable of basic physical survival immediately. A baby zebra can stand up, walk, and run desperately alongside its mother just 45 minutes after being born into the world. A newborn dolphin intuitively knows exactly how to push itself to the surface to take its very first necessary breath of air. Because their bodies are neurologically connected and muscularly developed at birth, baby animals can coordinate swimming movements almost immediately if necessary. Humans, on the other hand, are born altricial, meaning we enter the world entirely helpless, physically undeveloped, and profoundly vulnerable completely. A human infant cannot walk, cannot feed itself, cannot defend itself, and cannot even support the weight of its own fragile head for months. If a human baby is left alone in the wilderness for even a few hours, the outcome is almost always completely tragic and fatal immediately. Compare that to baby sea turtles, who dig themselves out of the sand and immediately sprint toward the crashing ocean entirely alone without any parental guidance whatsoever. Their tiny brains arrive preloaded with every single piece of information required to navigate massive oceans successfully on day one. This prolonged, dangerous helplessness is the hidden biological cost of developing the most complex and powerful brain in the animal kingdom. If human babies stayed inside the womb until they were fully developed physically like a horse, their massive skulls would never survive birth. The evolutionary mathematics simply did not allow a fully formed, massive human brain to pass through a narrow, bipedal human pelvis safely. So nature compromised by evicting us from the womb entirely prematurely, long before our nervous systems and muscles are properly connected together. How could a creature that requires a full year just to figure out how to stand upright possibly know how to swim instinctively? We enter the world radically unfinished, possessing a massive brain that demands years of slow programming before it can operate the physical body properly. Swimming requires complex coordinated movements across multiple muscle groups while simultaneously regulating breathing patterns, entirely consciously. It is a brilliant mathematical equation of fluid physics and biology our unfinished infant brains simply do not have the processing power to solve yet. So when we fall into water, we panic. Our heavy legs pull us down, our instincts betray us completely, and we must rely heavily on others to save us. On the surface, it sounds like a terrible evolutionary mistake, leaving the smartest creature on Earth completely defenseless against a simple puddle historically. But this apparent biological weakness is actually the hidden foundation of our absolute supremacy over every other species currently alive today. Because we do not have rigid, hardwired instincts telling us exactly how to move, our brains remain completely open to learning absolutely anything instead. A dog can only ever do the doggy paddle because instinct rigidly dictates its behavior in the water forever without any possibility for creative improvement. Its head remains painfully cranked backward to breathe, which exhausts its spine and burns enormous amounts of energy incredibly fast during emergencies. Most land mammals are actually terrible distance swimmers because their instinctive technique is wildly inefficient for anything beyond immediate short-term survival. They paddle desperately for a few agonizing minutes to cross a river or escape a predator, and then they stop completely exhausted physically. But humans, precisely because we have no genetic instructions holding us back biologically, can invent entirely new ways to move through water creatively. We can observe the flawless hydrodynamics of fish and replicate them consciously using our arms, legs, and flexible torsos together in perfect harmony. We invented the freestyle stroke, the breaststroke, the butterfly, and techniques that slice through heavy water with terrifying, beautiful mechanical efficiency. We learned how to cup our hands perfectly to catch the maximum amount of water and generate powerful forward momentum intelligently. We figured out how to rotate our hips to minimize drag, turning our clumsy bipedal bodies into sleek hydrodynamic torpedoes consciously. More importantly, our brains evolved alongside complex speech, giving us unprecedented conscious control over our own breathing patterns entirely. We can choose to inhale deeply, hold our breath comfortably, exhale slowly underwater, and time our breathing perfectly with our physical movements mechanically. No other land mammal can control its respiratory system consciously while exercising vigorously and remotely, the same way human beings can today. This unique conscious control allows humans to swim for hours, cross massive turbulent channels, and dive incredibly deep into the dark ocean continuously. We went from being the most vulnerable, pathetic mammal in the water to the undisputed masters of it through sheer intellectual willpower eventually. The Bajau people of Southeast Asia free-dive more than 200 feet deep, holding their breath for several minutes effortlessly while hunting underwater. Olympic swimmers glide through chlorinated pools at speeds that would leave a frantically paddling dog completely exhausted in mere seconds physically. We traded the cheap, easy biological trick of animal instinct for the infinite, terrifying adaptability of a brain that can literally teach itself anything. Yes, we are born entirely unable to swim, completely at the mercy of the wet environment around us for the first few fragile years of life. Yes, water is the one place on Earth that violently reminds humans we are still just fragile biological creatures underneath all our modern technology. It strips away our arrogance and forces us to respect the sheer unstoppable power of the natural world surrounding us silently. Drowning remains one of the leading causes of accidental death globally, a constant, grim reminder of our biological inadequacy in deep water. But we are also born with the staggering capacity to conquer that exact same water completely, once we decide it is time to learn consciously. The dog splashing in the lake will always just be surviving the water instinctively, waiting desperately for solid ground to return beneath its paws. The human, once properly trained, is actually dancing with the water, understanding its physics deeply, and manipulating its heavy resistance masterfully. We swim for recreation, for intense athletic competition, and sometimes purely for the profound psychological peace of being weightless temporarily. No other creature on Earth swims purely for the philosophical joy of feeling the water rushing past its skin on a quiet Sunday morning. Our profound inability to swim at birth is not a tragic failure of evolution. It is the exact beautiful price we paid for the freedom to evolve ourselves. We happily sacrificed a built-in survival code so we could write our own brilliant software from scratch inside an empty, infinitely capable mind. And ultimately, that is the defining, beautiful characteristic separating the messy human experience from the rigid animal kingdom everywhere you look today. Animals are trapped perfectly inside the biological limits of what nature designed them to do permanently, without exception or conscious rebellion ever. Humans start with absolutely nothing, terrified and sinking, only to rise back up to the surface and eventually figure out how to conquer the ocean.